Welcome back. Today it's the Hyundai Ioniq 5's turn in the State of Charge garage.
Charging started.
And that means we're going to talk all about how to charge the Hyundai Ioniq 5. We're going to go over the different levels of charging, the different equipment needed to charge the Ioniq 5, how long it takes on the different levels of charging, what functions Hyundai put inside the infotainment system to help improve your overall charging experience, all that good stuff coming up next. But please first, don't forget, click that subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming content here on State of Charge. All right, so before we get started, I want to get a couple of things clear. First off, what we go over today is really North American specific information. That's because in different regions of the world, electric vehicle charging varies, mostly slightly subtle differences, but it's enough that the information I give you here would be a little different, say if we were talking about Europe. Their electricity supply is different. They actually use different connectors that plug into the car. So while a lot of it really holds true no matter where you are, this is really North American specific. Secondly, I want to talk a little bit about terminology. A lot of people call these things that you see here hanging on the wall and even this portable unit here, electric car chargers. And it's okay if you call it an electric car charger, but that's really not the right term. The right term is EVSE because these are electric vehicle supply equipment. They supply electricity to the electric vehicle safely. That's their primary function. The actual charger is actually built into every electric vehicle. It's called an onboard charger. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So if you hear somebody talk about, I need to buy a new charger for my car, it's okay if they say that, but you should know that that's really not the right term. The charger is always built into the electric vehicle. These are charging stations or portable charging cords or EVSE. EVSE is the real proper term, but I know people aren't going to go around saying, oh, I need to buy a new EVSE, but I just like my followers to understand the terminology. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about the supplied equipment. What comes with the Ioniq 5? And it's this portable charging cord here that I have on the table. It comes stored underneath the false floor of the rear hatch. And typically people leave it in the car because if you're on the road and something happens, you need to plug in somewhere, you can always plug in and get some juice. Now, these things charge really slowly, which is what we're going to talk about now. This is called level 1 portable charging cord. And level 1 is the slowest type of electric vehicle charging you can have. It's a simple household outlet that you plug into. And you can charge an electric car from any simple household outlet. It takes really long because these things don't supply a lot of electricity. Some automakers now are supplying with the car a dual voltage portable charging cord, 120 volt and also 240 volt, which you would unplug this and plug in the 240 volt adapter and plug it into a 240 volt socket, and you could charge a lot quicker. Hyundai doesn't. They're kind of going old school with just supplying a 120 volt charging cord. So this is good in a pinch, but it's probably not what most Ioniq 5 owners are going to want to use for daily charging because the Ioniq 5 has a big battery, both versions of it, the small battery and the bigger battery, but even the small battery, 58 kilowatt hours, is big, and we'll explain why. So this plugs into a regular household outlet, as we have over here. I'm going to plug it in, and then I'm going to open up the charge port here. And then this is a J1772 connector. This is the type of electric vehicle connector that all electric vehicles in North America use except for Tesla. Tesla has their own proprietary connector, but electric vehicles from every other automaker use the J1772 connector to charge their car. So you plug this in here. Now wait for this. Come on. A little longer than usual.
Charging started.
There you go. That's one of the unique features that the Ioniq 5 has. When the charging initiates, the car gives you an audible alert that charging has started. It's the only electric vehicle I've ever seen do that. It's kind of fun, but you can go in the settings and disable that if you don't want everybody to know that your charging has started. But one of the things you need to know about this portable charging cord is it has adjustable settings on the unit. It comes set from the factory to only deliver 6 amps. And that's really low power. It can deliver up to 12 amps, and you toggle through 6, 8, 10, and 12 amps by pressing a button on the front of the unit, and you can set it to the amperage that your circuit can deliver. Most household outlets can deliver 12 amps that I have this set on now, but they allow you to derate it in case you're on a circuit that has a bunch of other things on that circuit, or a really old circuit and you're afraid of overloading it. So you can set it to match the amperage that you feel comfortable with the circuit delivering. In most cases, you can bump it up all the way to the 12 amps that this can deliver and still charge the car without any problems. But even at the highest level, it only adds somewhere between 3 and 5 miles of range per hour of charging. So when you think about that, the Ioniq 5 with the large 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, the rear wheel drive version can go 300 miles per charge. If you can only add 3 to 5 miles of range per hour of charging, you can do the math. You're not talking about hours, you're talking about days. And if you have to derate it down to the lowest setting, the 6 amps, you're talking many days to fully charge the car. Although, you don't come home and need to fully charge the car. Typically, you're just replenishing what you used in a day. So if you only drove 40 miles, when you come home at night and you plug it in, you only have to replenish 40 miles. So for some people, this standard level 1 portable charging cord will be enough, but most owners are going to want to just keep this thing tucked in the back of their trunk and buy a level 2 charger, which we're going to talk about next. Okay, so next let's talk about level 2 charging. Level 2 charging is charging from a 240 volt source. Level 1 was 120 volt, which is what a regular household outlet is. Level 2 is 240 volt, which is the type of an outlet that you might use for an electric clothes dryer or an electric range. You can also directly hardwire the units if you don't want to plug them in. But many of the popular units available on the market today do come as pluggable units, and it depends on the amount of power they deliver. So let's talk a little bit about the amount of power the Ioniq 5 can accept. The vehicle has a 10.9 kilowatt onboard charger, so it can accept up to 10.9 kilowatt of power. Now, you don't have to worry if you have a home charging station that can deliver more than 10.9 kilowatt, because the vehicle will only accept 10.9 kilowatt. It won't accept more power than it can safely take in. So you can get a charging station that delivers more power than what the Ioniq 5 can accept. It works that way with all electric vehicles. The vehicle always dictates how much power it takes in. So if you're searching for home charging stations, there are 40 amp home charging stations like this Electrify America home unit, and there are charging stations that can deliver more power like this ChargePoint Home Flex that can deliver up to 50 amps. So a 40 amp home charging station will deliver up to 9.6 kilowatt to the electric vehicle. Now, we said earlier that the Ioniq 5 can accept 10.9 kilowatt. So a 40 amp home charging station will deliver a little less power than the maximum charge rate that the Ioniq 5 can accept. To be honest with you, it's plenty of power. 9.6 kilowatt will charge the vehicle nearly as quickly as if you get one that it can deliver the maximum power, the 10.9 kilowatt. So if you really want the vehicle to charge as quickly as it possibly can, you need to get a 48 amp charging station like the ChargePoint Home Flex here. This actually can deliver up to 50 amps, but then you need to hardwire it, because home charging stations that plug in can only deliver up to 40 amps. Anything more than 40 amps, they have to be hardwired. Now you might be saying, but wait a minute, Tom, your ChargePoint Home Flex is plugged into an outlet and it can deliver more power than 40 amps. That's because a lot of these charging stations allow you to lower the amount of power it will deliver so you can plug them in. If I had hardwired this ChargePoint Home Flex, it would be able to deliver the full 50 amps. But since it's on a A plug, I have it lowered, so the most it can safely deliver is 40 amps. If you charge the Ioniq 5 on a 40 amp charging station, you're going to get somewhere between 25 and 30 miles of range added every hour you charge. If you get a higher powered charging station, one that can deliver the full 10.9 kilowatt that it can deliver, you're going to go a little bit quicker, maybe 30 to 33 or 34 miles of range per hour. So yeah, it's going to charge a little bit quicker. It's going to give you a couple more miles of range for every hour it's charged. But when you come home at night and you plug the vehicle in, it's always going to be charged by the next day. You know, I mean, even if you drove it down to nothing and the battery's completely empty, a 40 amp charging station will completely recharge the Ioniq 5 overnight. I think it'll fully recharge in about 7 hours if you're on a 48 amp charging station delivering the full 10.9 kilowatt. And if you're on a 40 amp charging station, it might take an extra hour. But either way, it's less time than what you have when you sleep at night, when you come home and you plug the vehicle in, and the next morning you leave in the morning. And you know what, even if you don't, for some reason, you come home really late at night and the battery's completely empty and you plug in and then you leave early in the morning, you don't have to leave with it 100% charged. It's not like every single day you go out and drive the maximum range that your electric vehicle has. So it's not the worst thing in the world if you leave and your battery's only at 80 or 85%. In any event, most people will find a 40 amp home charging station is more than enough to charge the Ioniq 5 daily. Even a 32 amp charging station, which will only deliver 7.7 kilowatts, most people are going to find that charges it more than fast enough. But you have to decide which type of speed you want for your Ioniq 5. You've got the 40 amp unit that's going to do 25 to 30 miles of range per hour, a 48 amp unit, 30 to maybe 34, 35 miles of range per hour. And if you've got a slower charger like a 32 amp charging station, 7.7 kilowatts, that might deliver around 20, 22 miles of range per hour. So you could do the math. If you drive even 100 miles every day, even a 32 amp charging station is going to fully recharge your Ioniq 5 when you charge overnight. Now, how about charging in public? There are level 2 public charging stations out there, and some of them are free. You might even get lucky and find them that actually you can plug in and charge for free. There's also workplace charging. Some employers now are installing workplace charging, and that's typically free also. But most of your public charging is going to be on networks, which charge you to charge your car. And for those, you have to join the network. You don't have to, but it makes it a lot easier. You could just pull up to an Electrify America charging station or a ChargePoint charging station or a Green Lots charging station. And there's usually a 1-800 number on the unit that you can call and activate a charging session, but it's a huge hassle. If you think you're going to be using public charging stations, you should join the networks that are near your house. Different areas of the country have different networks prevalent. Like here in the northern New Jersey, most of the level 2 charging stations are ChargePoint. And there are also level 2 charging stations at some Electrify America sites. So it would be prudent if you lived in this Northeast area to join ChargePoint and Electrify America. So that way when you pull up, you can just swipe your app, plug the vehicle in, start your charging session. You don't have to make a phone call. It's really a hassle if you want to use public charging stations. If you want to use a credit card, you have to call them, get it authorized. And you know, if it's raining out or if you're in a rush, it's really not convenient. So I urge you to join the networks that have charging stations in your area. So when you do need to use them, it's really simple. Now, how do you find these charging stations? The car has in its navigation system, it searches for local charging stations. But I've been driving this car for a few days now, and I found it not to be as robust as I would like it. But that's typical. Most of the in-car navigation systems that direct people to charging stations, I find deficient. What I really recommend people do is downloading apps. PlugShare and ChargeWay are two of my favorite apps for finding local charging stations. And you can map out your whole route if you're going on a long distance. You can see where the charging stations are ahead of time. These apps tell you how much they charge. Some of them actually will tell you if the charging station is in use. If it's a network charging station, it can tell you if it's being used, so you won't pull up and a car just pulled up and plugged in. PlugShare and ChargeWare are two very good apps. I highly recommend you downloading them if you think you're going to be using public charging frequently, they'll really help you find the right charging stations, know what the costs are, because the costs can vary greatly. Some of the networks have consistent pricing, like Electrify America, for instance. Their charging stations, state by state, are all the same pricing. But the ChargePoint network, the people that own the property actually own the equipment. They can set the price whatever they want. So you can plug into a charging station on the ChargePoint network right here, and it might cost you $2 an hour, and there will be a charging station right across the block. It could be $5 an hour. It could be that much of a difference. So these apps really help you determine what the price is, and then you can choose which charging station you plug into before you arrive. Once you arrive, you kind of want to plug in and get going, but this will give you an opportunity to look at it ahead of time. They also, the apps like PlugShare show you user feedback. If the charging station's broken, if it's unreliable, there'll be comments in there. So you won't pull up to a charging station that the last 10 comments said, charging station's broken, it doesn't work. That happens with public charging. Unfortunately, there's a very uneven experience with charging station to charging station. Some of them are very reliable, work all the time. Other sites, they're broken half the time or all the time. So you could use those apps to know before you pull up if you're going to be able to plug in. Okay, so next up is DC fast charging. We talked about level 1 charging, level 2 charging, and now the third level of charging is called DC fast charging. Some people call it level 3 charging. Again, that's not the proper term. It's kind of like calling these chargers and they're EVSE, but electric vehicles are new to a lot of people, so they just figure level 1, level 2, well, the next one must be level 3. But it's not. It's really called DC fast charging. So DC fast charging is where the Ioniq 5 really shines. It's one of the best DC fast charging electric vehicles available today. And part of that why is because it uses an 800 volt battery system. Most electric vehicles today use 400 volt battery systems. The vehicles that use 800 volt systems, like the Porsche Taycan, the Lucid Air, they actually use a 900 volt system. And then now the Ioniq 5 and its sister vehicle, the EV6, they inherently charge faster because the voltage is higher. So one of the really good things about this vehicle is its charging. Now, Hyundai claims the vehicle will charge from 10% to 80% in 18 minutes. So think about that. We're talking about miles per hour before on the level 2 and level 1, and how many days it takes on level 1. 10 to 80% in 18 minutes with a Ioniq 5 on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. Now we got to talk about power here, because that saying on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger is really important, because there are a lot of DC fast chargers out there in the wild these days. There's different networks that have them. EVgo is a big DC fast charge network. ChargePoint have some, and they're getting more. Electrify America is really the big boy with DC fast charging in North America. They're the largest network. They have the most sites, they have the most charging stations, and they have the highest power. A lot of the DC fast chargers on the ChargePoint network and the EVgo network are 50 kilowatt DC fast chargers. They're limited to only 50 kilowatts. Now, if you pull up on one of those, it's going to take a lot longer than 18 minutes to charge from 10 to 80%. So let me explain why. The Ioniq 5 has a peak charging rate of about 240 kilowatt. It can accept 240 kilowatt at its peak. Now, it doesn't accept it the whole time. It only accepts it for a short time, and then it starts ramping down, because DC fast charging isn't like level 1 and level 2 charging. When you plug in level 1 or level 2 charging, it kind of immediately takes the maximum draw, the 10.9 kilowatt, and holds it the whole time till the very end, till it's like 98% charged, then it slows down. But with DC fast charging, it can't do that. As the state of charge gets higher, the amount of power the car accepts will get lower. And the car peaks at 240. It only holds it for a little time, but it's enough to put a lot of power in the car really quickly. So you want to try to find a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger if you want to charge from 10% to 80% in only 18 minutes. Well, how do you do that? Well, the apps that I told you earlier. Electrify America app is really good in that case, because it has their whole network and it shows you the power that each station can deliver. But so does PlugShare and so does ChargeWay. Those apps are really good also. The in-car nav for DC fast charging, doesn't tell you the power level. It just tells you if it's a DC fast charger. So you don't know if you're rolling up to a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger or a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. So, you know, the Ioniq 5 will charge about 4 times faster if it's on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger than if you pull up to a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger. But what I will tell you is don't stress too much about finding a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. If you plug into a 150 kilowatt DC fast charger, many of the Electrify America sites only have 150 kilowatt DC fast chargers. It won't charge that much slower. You're talking about 4 or 5 minutes longer to go from 10 to 80%. So it's really not that big of a deal. But one thing I will tell you is all electric vehicles, their charging speed on DC fast chargers are really affected by cold weather. And the Ioniq 5 is no exception. As a matter of fact, it might even be a little worse than some of the other vehicles that I've tested on DC fast chargers when they're cold. I've now done 3 DC fast charge sessions with this guy here on different DC fast chargers, and it took me exactly 30 minutes to charge from 10 to 80%. Not the 18 minutes that Hyundai promised, but it's 20 degrees out. The battery's very cold. When batteries are cold, they can't accept the maximum power that they can when they're warm. Some electric vehicles have a thing called preconditioning for DC fast charging. If you know you're going to a DC fast charger, or if you set in your navigation system that you're going to a DC fast charger, the car will automatically turn on these battery warmers and it'll get the battery nice and warm so you can charge faster. The Ioniq 5 has something called winter mode that's supposed to warm the battery a little, but it doesn't work like some of the other systems on like Tesla vehicles or the Porsche Taycan or the Lucid Air. Those vehicles have really robust battery warmers, and if you turn it on like 20 minutes before you get to the DC fast charger, it's nearly as hot as it can be to get the maximum charge rate. I haven't found that with the Ioniq 5 at all. It doesn't work that well at all. There are some rumblings that Hyundai is going to improve that and through an over-the-air update have better battery warming. But as of now, this is February of 2022, the cars out here in the US don't have a robust battery warming system. So you're going to take a lot longer to DC fast charge than you will when it's warmer. So if you do plug in the winter and you see that it's taking longer, don't stress about it. Don't call your dealership and say the car's broke, it doesn't charge in 18 minutes like you promised. It's because the battery is cold, and that happens with all electric vehicles. Seek out the 350 kilowatt DC fast chargers, but if you can't find one, the 150 is going to do just fine. A 50 kilowatt unit is going to take a long time to charge, but sometimes that's all you have. That's why the apps are really good to help you find where the higher powered DC fast chargers are, so you could plan your route according, even if you have to go 5 or 10 minutes out of your way to get to a high powered DC fast charger, it's worth it because it'll charge so much quicker. And one last thing I want to talk about with DC fast charging is Hyundai has a deal with Electrify America. And when you buy or lease an Ioniq 5, you get 2 years of unlimited complimentary 30-minute charging sessions. So you plug in, charge for 30 minutes, you should be at least 80%. We typically don't recommend charging past 80 or 90% on a DC fast charger because the charging rate gets so slow, it's barely faster than level 2 charging. And you also don't want to always fully charge your battery to 100%. When you're on a long road trip, it's okay, but for most daily charging, it's probably most prudent to only charge to about 85%. Most people charge to 80, 85% for daily. The car has great range. Even the smallest battery has well over 200 miles of driving range, so you don't really need to charge to 100%. And in reducing your daily charging rate to only about 80, 85%, you'll help the battery last a long time. One last thing I want to mention about DC fast charging, the Ioniq 5 uses the CCS or combo connector. There's another standard called CHAdeMO that Nissan uses, and Nissan is actually beginning to phase that out. Their new electric vehicles are going to have the CCS combo. In the beginning of electric vehicles, a few years back, there was a kind of a standards war, which connector we were going to be using. CHAdeMO actually came out first. It was really the Asian standard, but here in North America, we created the SAE CCS combo, which is what everybody is using. Now, I'm mentioning this because there are some charging stations out there that only have the CHAdeMO connector. And that's another reason why you need to use the apps, because the in-car navigation could send you to a charging station that doesn't use the connector that you use. Now, most of the new charging stations all have two connectors on them. It's either two CCS connectors or a CCS connector and a CHAdeMO connector. Now, Tesla has their own superchargers. Only Tesla can use. You can't use the supercharger network to charge the Hyundai Ioniq 5. Not yet, at least. Tesla's been talking about, well, actually Elon Musk, the CEO, has been talking about opening up the Tesla supercharger network so that all vehicles can use it. And he's actually started a couple of pilot programs in Europe, but not here in the US yet. In the US, no electric vehicle can use the Tesla supercharger network except Tesla vehicles. You can, however, use Tesla destination chargers, which are level 2 charging stations that Tesla has installed thousands of them around the country at destinations like restaurants, hotels, country clubs, things like that. They've installed these level 2 destination chargers. You can use them to charge your Ioniq 5 if you buy an adapter. It's called a Tesla to J1772 adapter. I have some videos up here on State of Charge that talk about those and how you use them. The only thing I will quickly say, well, I'll recommend you watching those videos, but I'll quickly add, if you do get one of those adapters for your Ioniq 5, make sure the adapter is rated at 50 amps or more. Because if you get one that's, say, a 32 amp adapter, the Ioniq 5 can accept, as we said, 10.9 kilowatts. That's more than 32 amps. So you'll have the Tesla charging station delivering more power to your car than what that adapter can accept. So always look for a 50 amp or higher Tesla to J1772 adapter if you want to charge on a Tesla charging station. Let's say you already have a Tesla in your household and now you get the Ioniq 5 and you have a Tesla wall connector like I have here in the State of Charge garage. You can use that to charge your Ioniq 5. All you need to do is get a Tesla to J1772 adapter and you won't have to get a second charging station. You can just take turns on the two cars with your Tesla wall connector and you're fine. The next thing I'd like to point out are the little pixels in the charge port. Now, the design language on the Ioniq 5 are all about pixels, these tiny little squares. They're everywhere on the vehicle, on the front lights, the rear tail lights, inside the vehicles. I love it. It's kind of like an 80s retro look, but these actually have a function here. As you can see, there's 4 levels. There's 1 pixel, then 2, then 3, then 4. And they tell you roughly how charged your Ioniq 5 is. If only one light is blinking, that means it's between 0 and 25% charged. If the second row is between 25 and 50, as you can see, the third row of lights are blinking here now, and that tells me the car is somewhere between 50% and 75% charged. And once that top row is blinking, then it's between 75 and 100% charged. So when you plug right in, you immediately know about how charged the vehicle is. Okay, so next, let's take a look at 2 cool features the Ioniq 5 has. One is preconditioning, so the vehicle will be nice and warm or cool when you get into it, and also scheduled charging, which allows you to save money on your electricity rate. So let's go into EV. Down here on the schedule, and we'll take a look at the scheduled charging and scheduled climate. Let's first take a look at scheduled charging. Now, scheduled charging allows you to charge your vehicle during off-peak hours. Off-peak hours are when your utility charges you less money for electricity during a certain period of the day. It's usually sometime around midnight to 6 a.m. You should check with your utility and see if they have off-peak hours. And that's actually called time of use plans, because if you do get an electric car, you might be able to save some money on your electric bill. So this is how you set it. You would say, okay, the start time on my time of use plan is midnight. Okay, so 12 a.m. and it ends at 6 a.m. So let's go down to 6 a.m. Okay, so now there's 2 options you have: prioritize off-peak charging and charge only during off-peak charging. I'm going to click that. So by checking that box, the vehicle will only charge during from midnight to 6 a.m. And even if you come home at 5 o'clock at night and you plug the car into your charger, the vehicle will recognize it's been plugged in, but then it will wait until midnight before it starts charging and you'll pay less. If you click the prioritize off-peak charging, it'll prioritize charging during those 6 hours. But let's say the vehicle needs 7 hours to finish charging. it'll start charging at 11 p.m. the night before. So it'll get 1 hour on the full rate and then 6 hours on the reduced rate. So let's set that in. Now it's set and it's saved. Your scheduled charging is on, and now it will not start charging until 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Let's take a look at scheduled climate. But first, before we do that, we actually need to go in here, right there. So on the scheduled climate, it gives you 2 departure times. Departure 1, I already set. If you take a look at it, I have Monday through Friday checked. And at 6 a.m. is when I want to depart. So what happens is, before 6 a.m., probably around 5:30 or so, the vehicle will wake up and it'll start heating up the car. It's in the middle of the winter now. Even in my garage here, it gets pretty cold. It gets like 35 to 38 degrees. But it'll warm the car up for me. So when I get in at 6 a.m. to go to work, the car's nice and warm. Now you want to do this while it's plugged in, because you don't want to drain down the battery without having the vehicle plugged in. When it's plugged in, you'll leave, the car will be fully charged and it'll be nice and warm. So let's say we have it set for this date. As we did, it's all set. You could also set a second departure date. What some people do is set it for the morning when they're leaving, and then set a second departure for the evening when they're getting back to their car to drive home at night. Okay, now we have that set. So now let's go back to here. So now we have to schedule the climate. Now it's on. Now, if you want to change the temperature, I say I want it at 70 degrees. Well, maybe you want it a little bit warmer. You set it at 72. If you want the defrosters on, you click that. It'll start defrosting. And now, see, when a charging cable is connected, schedule climate and activate based on your departure time. So the vehicle needs to be plugged in. Some electric vehicles will allow you to precondition and warm the car up when it's not plugged in. It's not advisable because you might drain the battery down to the point where you can't make it home if you haven't been charging the last couple of days. But the Ioniq 5 evidently requires it to be plugged in. So now we set this here. So now it's all set. I'm scheduled for charging during off-peak hours. I'll save some money on my electric. And I also have the preconditioning set. So when I get in the car in the morning, it'll be nice and toasty warm. Okay, next up, let's look at winter mode. Click on EV. Click on this cog icon here. See down here, it says winter mode. Now, when you click on winter mode, what that does is, if it's very cold, the car will be warming the battery as you're driving. It helps to have better performance when you're DC fast charging. In my experience, it doesn't work that well. It warms up the battery a little bit, but some of the preconditioning on other electric vehicles warm up the battery a lot more so they can accept more power when you're DC fast charging. Now, what this will do is it will reduce your driving range, and it tells you that because it's using some energy to keep the battery warm. That energy could be used in propelling the vehicle. I think if I had an Ioniq 5, I probably would keep this unchecked most of the time, unless I lived in an extremely cold weather area where it went down below 0 degrees Fahrenheit regularly. Then I think I would leave that checked. But other than that, I don't really see the advantage of it. It doesn't seem like it really works that well. I've used this battery warming systems in other electric vehicles like Tesla and Lucid and Porsche Taycan. They work fantastically. This one, well, it doesn't work that well. I think it's wasted energy. While we're in here, let's take a look at something else. Maximum percent charge. So when you're DC fast charging and when you're charging on level 1 or level 2, which is AC charging, the vehicle lets you limit the charge rate. What a lot of people do, a lot of people don't charge to 100% for daily charging. This vehicle has a lot of range. The small battery has 220 miles of EPA rated range. The larger battery up to 303 miles of range. So most people don't need that for daily driving. So they'll set it at 90%. Why would you do that? Well, you would do that because for long life, it's better not to charge your electric vehicle's battery to 100% every day. You can do it when you need that extra range, when you're on a long road trip, that's fine. But for daily charging, you really don't need that full 200 to 300 miles of range. And most people don't drive that much in a day. So most people will set it at 90%. I know a lot of people that even set it to 80%, and that's even better. It helps the battery last longer. Batteries don't like to be fully charged all of the time, and lowering the percent that you charge to daily will help keep the battery in good shape for many years. So I recommend either 80 or 90% daily charging, depending on how much range you actually need every day. Now, you could also do that when you're DC fast charging.
I had it set to 100% because I just did a DC fast charging recording, 0 to 100%. That's another video I have up here on state of charge, so check that out. The same thing with this. I would probably set it to 90%, maybe even to 80%, depends on how far I need it to go. If I was on a really long road trip, if you need the miles, if you need that extra range, don't be afraid to put it to 100%. But if you really don't need it, then don't do it. Set it to 90 or 80%. And you're fine. If that's enough range, that's really all you need. So that's how you limit the maximum amount of charge for the vehicle, and also battery warming function. I should have stayed in that cog there because there's one more thing that I'd like to point out, and that's charging current. This is for AC charging. You can limit the amount of power that the vehicle takes in.
As you can see, there are 3 settings, maximum, reduced, and minimum, that allow you to adjust the amount of power the Ioniq 5 takes in. Most people will really never use this feature, and they'll simply just leave it on maximum all of the time. However, some people do prefer to charge more slowly, and they also may be charging from a circuit that cannot deliver as much power as the Ioniq 5 will want to accept. Also, if you're plugged into a charging source and you're not sure it can deliver as much power as the car is going to request without tripping the circuit, you can set this to reduced power. You'll charge slower, but at least you won't overload the circuit and shut off charging. Okay, now that we talked about how to charge the Ioniq 5, we're going to talk about the exact opposite. How do we offload power from the vehicle? That's because the Ioniq 5 is one of the first electric vehicles that has something called vehicle to load, which means you can actually pull power from the car to power electrical devices. Now, the Ioniq 5 won't power your whole home like the upcoming Ford F-150 Lightning is supposed to be able to do, but it can be very useful. There's 2 ways that you can offload power. First, if you get the limited Ioniq 5, which this is, there's a power outlet beneath the rear seats. Now, that can only be used while the car is turned on, but for long road trips, you can power electrical devices from the vehicle while it's on. Now, while the vehicle is off, you can actually also offload power, but in order to do that, you need to get one of these. This is the V2L, or vehicle to load adapter. It costs $220 from your local Hyundai dealer. It doesn't come with the car. Now, the ability to offload power comes with all Ioniq 5, so even the base model with the small battery can do this, but you have to buy this adapter, which costs $225. Well, let's take a look at the adapter. On this one side here, it's got a nice rubberized cover. It is, no surprise, a J1772 plug. So what you'd basically do is, let's open up the charge port here. You plug this into the J1772 outlet, and now on this side here, you pull this open. There's a plug under there, which you can plug an extension cord in. This will deliver up to 1.9 kilowatt, which is pretty much the maximum that a normal household circuit would deliver. So you can actually power quite a bit with that. Again, it won't power your whole house. Well, maybe it will if you own one of those little tiny homes, and maybe it'll power the house, but it'll do things like laptops, some power tools, pretty much anything that you'd plug into a regular 120 volt standard household outlet can be powered by this. So let's take a look at what it can do. So how much power can the Ioniq 5 offload with its vehicle to load adapter? I mentioned up to 1.9 kilowatt, but what does that translate to? As you can see here, I've got a lamp going, it's powering my laptop, and I have a Keurig coffee maker, which I've just turned on. I'm going to brew myself a nice cup of coffee. Now, these items here don't draw a lot of power, but it all adds up, and an appliance like a coffee maker actually does draw a lot of power. So you can see with the vehicle to load adapter, you can actually power quite a few things and set yourself up with a little mini office somewhere. In the case of a power outage, you could use it temporarily. Maybe if you're at a park somewhere and you want to get a fresh cup of coffee or power something else that you're going to cook with, or even power tools. Small power tools will be able to be powered by this without a problem. So it's working just fine. My cup of coffee is all brewed. Thanks, Hyundai. Notice I used a Tesla cup. Well, that's because Hyundai never gave me a cup. If you give me a cup, Hyundai, I'll drink my coffee out of a Hyundai cup. Well, that's it for our how to charge and how to use the vehicle to load features of the 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5. I hope we answered the questions you had about this really interesting and really cool looking new electric vehicle. I just love the retro 80s look that this guy has here. I really love it. In any event, we did some DC fast charging recordings. I have those videos up on State of Charge also. So if you're interested in how the vehicle DC fast charges, check out those videos. I also have a 70-mile-an-hour highway range test that I did with this guy, but that's over on the Inside EVs YouTube channel. So check that out also. As I said, I hope we got to all of your questions, but if we didn't, leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to get answers from all the questions that you have. If I don't know them, I'll reach out to Hyundai and try to get the answers directly for them. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget, click that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, click a like on this video, all that good stuff, so you don't miss any upcoming content here on State of Charge.